Hi guys, so let's talk about calculating results for your campaign using the ad spend calculator spreadsheet. This is a really important step so that we're setting very clear and realistic expectations in setting up and getting the campaign going for you. And I'll talk a little bit more about why this is so important as we go through, but essentially this is the calculator here, and it's pretty simple and fairly basic to use. Once we walk through it, I'm sure you'll be able to understand it really well and the strategy behind using this particular spreadsheet as such. Okay, so the first thing we need to establish here are what are the revenue targets that you're aiming for with your campaign. Now we can set these up for a time frame. We normally like to work on a 90-day cycle or a quarterly cycle. So if you keep that in mind and build out the first one for the first 90 days, because things will change over time, but it's a great place to start. So just for this example, let's just say your revenue target for the 90 days was $10,000. Okay, so that's the revenue you want to make on the next 90 days out of your campaign. And then we've got to determine what the average worth of a client is to you. So, you know, is your client worth, $1,000? Are they worth $500? Whatever that figure is here, then we put that figure in there. Now you can actually put in here the average value of your client, the lifetime value of your client. But for example, with a real estate sale, generally it'll be a one-off sort of value that you'll be working with a client with. If you're in the area of financial advice or accountancy or anything where you had a recurring fee and a recurring service basis on an ongoing basis, then you may want to work with the average lifetime value of a client. So it's totally up to you, but for the purpose of for this video, I think it's good to just work with the average client worth with the first sale up front. So if we were saying here that the average client worth was, let's just say $10,000, then what would happen here is then the average number of clients required would be one every 90 days to actually reach that revenue target. So what we need to do now from the perspective of the campaign is work out the close rate and the number of leads we actually need to be sending to actually ensure that you close one client every 90 days. Now this is where things get interesting, because when we come down here, and this is really important, normally in an industry, your close rate can be anywhere between 5 and 10%. Now 5% might seem really low, and you can get it up by using SMS messaging and things like that. But you're talking about, cold traffic coming in from a campaign. They're fairly cold still. So it's a fairly realistic mark, and we want to make sure that we're setting the right expectations here. So anywhere from 5 to 10% on a close rate is probably a good place to start. And it's also really important to think about, when you're talking about this 5 to 10% too, if you can actually respond to an inquiry within the first hour, your likelihood of closing a client is much higher than if you're leaving it even until the next day. So response times are critical too. So there's a number of factors that will actually play into your lead conversion rate. Something else you should also keep in mind, if you've been basing all of your leads on referral marketing, you've got to remember that referrals that are given to you are quite warm leads. So you may be experiencing close rates of 80 to 90% on your referral marketing, which is great, that's how it should be. But when it comes to cold traffic coming through from campaigns, which do eventually turn into warm and hot traffic, then you're looking at that 5 to 10% mark. So I just want to make sure that you're very clear about the expectations and what this may look like from the outset in any campaign that we're doing. So what this means for us is that we need to generate 20 leads in order to get that one client based on our conversion rate of 5% that we've got built into this spreadsheet here. Now what we need to do is determine how many leads we need to send to a landing page, if we're using a landing page for example, to actually convert and make the numbers stack up according to our one client every 90 days based on 20 leads. And we work on a landing page conversion rate of 20%. Now if we're using other types of ads such as lead ads in Facebook, that actually get that information, then that will be a little bit different. It'll be probably similar, but not exactly the same, and we don't know the differences until we start split testing lead ads versus landing pages, for example. But if we're not getting around about that 20% mark on a click-through on a landing page, we know that is where the bottleneck is. There is something that is not quite gelling on that landing page when people click through. So based on the spreadsheet here, we would have to get 167 clicks to get that 20 inquiries and that one client conversion based on all the numbers here every 90 days. Now, in order to get these leads, we put in an estimated cost per click. And if we work on an estimated cost per click of around about $3 cost per click, and this will change depending on the type of ad that we're doing and the type of audience targeting that we do, but we very much test audiences before we start putting a lot of money into ad campaigns. So we rapidly test the audience's responses through a number of different strategies that we use before we actually really fuel the fire. So based on the $3 cost per click, we need an estimated ad click-through rate of 1%, which is quite low. You'd want to be getting, closer to 2, over 2 ultimately, with a reach size there of 16,667 based on the calculator. So the Facebook ad spend required over the 90 days for this type of conversion based on these initial metrics that we have in here would be $500, and the cost per lead would be $15 per lead. So the idea is that we work on, these are very much variables at this stage because we're working in an area that we don't know. We haven't got history here always to work with. Obviously, if we can get the opt-in landing page conversion rate up, that affects the cost per lead. So at the moment it's $15 cost per lead, and you're actually spending $500 to make the average one client sale of $10,000, which is a good markup there. It's a very viable proposition. But the other variable we also have too is the cost per click. If we can get the cost per click down, then that actually affects the whole way the spreadsheet looks as well. So we're always working on optimizing and working on those variables to get the best results. Okay, so this is how we actually set out the campaign. This is how we calculate results. These are quite conservative figures and variables that we've got in here at the moment, but I can't emphasize enough one of the most critical areas is this area here, and this really falls back to quick response times, good engagement with prospects, and good follow-up and good relationship building with them. Really critical to actually try and get that lead conversion rate up. It's one of the most critical things in running any Facebook campaign whatsoever.